My name is Peggy. I'm 35 years old, and tonight I want to share a story with you. A story I never thought I would have to tell. It begins on a bitter winter evening, the kind of cold that doesn't just sting your skin, it seeps straight into your bones. The streets outside were silent, blanketed with frost. But inside my house, laughter, clinking glasses, music. My in-laws were hosting what looked like a glamorous dinner party. People I barely even knew were sipping expensive wine, their voices echoing through the warm glow of my living room. And then I saw it. Through the glass of the front door, I noticed two familiar shapes. My parents, both in their 70s, were standing outside. Their lips were blue, their hands trembled as the icy wind whipped around them. My father, who had only months ago survived a triple bypass surgery, was clutching his chest as if trying to shield his fragile heart from the cold. My mother, her fingers stiff from arthritis, leaned against him for balance. I froze. My parents, my everything, were locked out of my own home while strangers laughed and drank inside. In that moment, something inside me broke. I pushed through the crowd of my in-laws' guests, my heart pounding louder than the music. I yanked the door open, the cold air rushing in like a slap across the face. My mother's eyes met mine, red, watery, full of pain. My father's lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but no words came. And I asked myself, how did it come to this? How did the people who had sacrificed everything for me end up standing outside, shivering, humiliated, while my husband's family turned my home into their kingdom? You see, this isn't just a story about one cold night. It's about years of love, sacrifice, and betrayal. It's about the clash of two families, one who gave without ever asking for anything in return, and another who believed money and status gave them the right to everything. But more than anything, it's about a choice I had to make. That night, standing between the warmth of my house and the freezing cold where my parents stood abandoned, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. And what I did next, it changed everything. Before I take you into that moment, before I reveal how I made them pay for what they did, I want you to know who my parents were and why this story matters so much to me. Because to understand the depth of my pain, you first need to understand the depth of their love. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just my story. It's a lesson, a warning, and maybe, just maybe, a reminder to never take family for granted. Before I tell you about the battles inside my marriage, I need to take you back to the very beginning, to the two people who shaped every part of who I am today, my parents. My father, Thomas, was a simple man. He worked with his hands, calloused, rough, scarred from years in the factory. But when he came home and held mine, those hands were the gentlest in the world. He wasn't rich, he wasn't educated beyond high school, but he carried something far greater than wealth: dignity, discipline, and love. My mother, Eleanor, was the kind of woman who could turn nothing into something. I still remember the nights when dinner was just rice and beans. She would light candles, lay out napkins, and tell me we were having a special meal. As a child, I didn't realize we were broke. To me, it felt magical. That was her gift. She could hide the struggle and make everything feel safe. We lived in a modest ranch house on the edge of town. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and a roof that always seemed to leak in the spring. But it was filled with warmth, laughter, and stories. My dad would sing old country songs on Sunday mornings while Mom hummed along in the kitchen. When it came to me, their only child, they gave everything. My father worked double shifts, sometimes falling asleep in his work boots just to make sure I could join the school's dance program or afford a new book. My mother took sewing jobs at night, her eyes straining in the dim light, to pay for field trips. They never once complained, Instead, they smiled when they saw me happy, because for them, that was enough. I remember one Christmas in particular. I was maybe 12. All my friends were getting new bikes and video games. I knew we couldn't afford much, so I didn't expect anything. That morning, I came downstairs to find a box wrapped in shiny paper. Inside was a second-hand typewriter. It was old, heavy, the keys stiff, but when I pressed them, letters stamped onto the page. My mother said, "Peggy, you always loved stories. Now you can write your own." That moment lit a fire in me. That typewriter wasn't just a gift, it was a sacrifice. They had skipped paying the heating bill for a month to get it for me. And that kind of love, it leaves a mark. Years later, when I was accepted into college, I knew we couldn't afford it. Tuition was more than my parents made in a year. I told them I'd take a break, maybe work first, but my dad looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Peggy, you're going. You're going to live a life better than mine. That's why we work this hard." They drained their savings. My mom picked up extra shifts. Dad borrowed from friends. Every single penny went to my education. And when I walked across that stage 4 years later with a degree in hand, I searched the crowd. My dad was standing there in his worn-out jacket, tears streaming down his face. My mom clapped so hard her hands turned red. That was the kind of love I grew up with. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. By the time my father turned 60, his body began to fail him. Years of hard labor had weakened him, and soon his heart gave out. 8 months ago, doctors had to open his chest and repair it with a triple bypass. He survived, but he was fragile. And my mother, her arthritis had grown so severe that sometimes she couldn't even hold a cup of tea without pain. Still, they insisted on independence. They lived in that same little ranch house, the one filled with so many memories, and I stayed close, just 15 minutes away. Sunday dinners were our tradition. I called them every day. I made sure they never felt forgotten. Because the truth is, I owed them everything. And maybe that's why when I later saw them left outside in the freezing cold while my in-laws partied inside, the anger that rose in me wasn't just about disrespect. It was about betrayal. Because anyone who could treat them that way, after all they had given me, was crossing a line I could never forgive. Peggy paints a heartfelt picture of her parents' sacrifices, then hints, and maybe that's why when I saw them left outside in the freezing cold, something inside me snapped. I still remember the first time I met Robert. It was at a mutual friend's dinner party, the kind that neither of us enjoyed much. But somehow, fate seemed determined to throw us together. He stood across the room, tall, perfectly put together, exuding confidence. There was a certain charm about him, the kind that draws people in almost immediately. His laughter was contagious, his smile disarming, and the way he listened made it feel like I was the only person in the room. I should have been cautious. My parents always warned me about men who were too polished, those who seemed too perfect to be real. But something about Robert felt different. There was a warmth underneath the charm, a subtle honesty in his eyes. I allowed myself to be intrigued. We talked for hours that night about life, dreams, small fears. He was curious, attentive, and kind. For the first time in a long while, I felt understood. He didn't try to impress me with wealth or status. He simply wanted to know who I was. And I, desperate for a connection, let myself believe he truly cared. The early days were a whirlwind of excitement. Long dinners, stolen weekend trips, late-night phone calls. Robert seemed genuinely invested in building a life together. He was protective but not controlling, affectionate but respectful of boundaries. My parents, who had always been cautious about the man in my life, were cautiously optimistic. They liked him, even if they didn't quite trust the polished charm. But cracks began to show early on, subtle at first. Small disagreements about money, minor differences in taste, hints of his parents' influence. Robert's parents, Nancy and Walter, were social climbers who believed appearances were everything. They often inserted themselves into his life, offering advice that was more controlling than helpful. At first, I brushed it off. Who didn't have overbearing parents? Yet with time, their influence grew. Robert began deferring to them on decisions that should have been ours alone. The first incident wasn't dramatic. A painting he had ordered for our shared apartment, when I had picked and loved, was reconsidered after a conversation with Nancy. "It's lovely, dear," she said over the phone, "but it doesn't quite fit the image we want for our family." I hesitated, trying not to take it personally. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But the pattern became clear. Robert valued his parents' opinions above mine, above what we agreed upon together. And yet, despite these early warning signs, I loved him deeply, too much. I wanted to believe that with love, patience, and communication, we could navigate any challenge. We moved in together shortly after our engagement. The apartment felt like our first real home, a place where we could start building our life. But even then, the tension simmered beneath the surface. Robert was eager to please everyone, and that included his parents. He would sometimes cancel plans with me to attend family functions or take calls from them in the middle of our evenings. I tried to understand, tried to forgive, thinking it was part of love and compromise. Little did I know, these small compromises were just the beginning, and the storm was coming faster than I could imagine. Buying a house was supposed to be the happiest moment of our lives. Robert and I had spent months searching for the perfect home, a place that would reflect both of our tastes, our ambitions, and our vision for the future. After countless weekends of touring properties, we finally found it. A spacious, sunlit house in a quiet neighborhood with high ceilings, a garden, and a guest suite perfect for hosting family and friends. From the beginning, I felt it was mine as much as it was ours. I had contributed the majority of the down payment, saving diligently for years, sacrificing small luxuries so that I could invest in something permanent and meaningful. This house represented security, independence, and a shared dream finally coming true. Robert, however, seemed more focused on the social possibilities than the personal comfort. His parents, Nancy and Walter, were ecstatic. They envisioned grand dinner parties, networking events, and social gatherings that would establish our home as a destination for their acquaintances. They subtly pushed Robert into making design choices that reflected their tastes rather than ours. Opulent chandeliers, expensive furniture, and extravagant decorations that seemed completely unnecessary. At first, I laughed off their interference. They're just excited, I told myself. They mean well. But the excitement quickly morphed into control. I noticed little things: Nancy criticizing the placement of a painting, Walter commenting on the color of the curtains, Robert deferring to them instead of discussing with me. I tried to assert myself politely, but Robert often brushed me off, saying, "It's just easier this way, Peggy. They're helping." The first real warning sign came during the final walkthrough before closing. We noticed minor changes that had been made without consulting us: upgraded fixtures, rearranged layouts, and notes from contractors that referenced Nancy's preferences. I asked Robert about it. "They just wanted to help speed things along," he said, avoiding my gaze. I thought it was fine.
I felt a pang of unease, but tried to stay calm. After all, we were about to finalize the purchase. Our excitement and relief overshadowed the small red flags. I reminded myself that love and patience could smooth out these early bumps. Moving in was a chaotic mix of joy and subtle tension. My parents were thrilled, helping unpack boxes, organizing the kitchen, and offering advice on how to make the house truly feel like home. Robert's parents, however, quickly began making their presence felt. Nancy suggested furniture arrangements for the living room, claiming it would look more professional for when we hosted social events. Walter offered unsolicited advice on security systems, landscaping, and lighting. I tried to draw boundaries, but Robert often sided with them. They just know better, he would say, leaving me feeling undermined and excluded. Small disagreements turned into subtle arguments, and I began noticing a pattern. Whenever I expressed discomfort or suggested alternatives, Robert either dismissed my concerns or justified his parents' interference. The guest suite, which I had envisioned as a private retreat for friends and family, was particularly contentious. Nancy had ideas of transforming it into a mini social lounge for her gatherings, complete with expensive decor and furniture arrangements she insisted were necessary for entertaining. I pushed back, asserting that the space should remain ours. Robert, caught between me and his parents, offered vague compromises that satisfied no one. By the time the housewarming approached, I was already uneasy. I had hoped our first major event in the new home would be a simple celebration with close friends and family, a joyful, intimate evening. But the undercurrents of tension with Robert and his parents were impossible to ignore. Little did I know, this event would mark the beginning of a storm that would shake my trust, my marriage, and my sense of security to the core. Peggy senses the first signs of manipulation and control. I had hoped our new home would be a sanctuary, but I was starting to realize that the real owners of this house might not be Robert and me after all.
The day of the housewarming started like any other celebration. Boxes were mostly unpacked, flowers arranged, the kitchen stocked with snacks and drinks. And I had meticulously planned the guest list to ensure a warm, intimate gathering. My parents were helping me put the finishing touches, their excitement infectious. I had envisioned laughter, conversations with close friends, and a night filled with memories that would make the house truly ours. But the moment Robert's parents arrived, the tone of the evening shifted. Nancy and Walter didn't come simply as guests. They arrived with a plan, and it was clear from the first step inside. Nancy immediately took control of the living room, rearranging furniture, fluffing pillows, and insisting that the dining table be set properly for a more formal presentation. Walter hovered in the kitchen, questioning the placement of each tray, subtly insinuating that my arrangements were inadequate. Robert barely lifted a finger to intervene. He smiled awkwardly at me, avoiding eye contact. "They just want to help," he whispered, but their help quickly became a takeover. Friends arrived, and the atmosphere shifted. Instead of warm greetings, my guests were subtly guided by Nancy and Walter toward the areas they deemed appropriate for entertaining, with the guest suite becoming off-limits under the pretense of preparing for future special events. I tried to maintain composure. "Everything's fine," I said, forcing the smile, even as my father shuffled awkwardly, sensing the growing tension. My mother's eyes met mine briefly, a silent acknowledgement that she too noticed the subtle power play. It was at that moment I realized this wasn't just about control of decor. It was about control of us, our home, and our lives. The first real shock came when Nancy announced, with a casual condescension that cut deeper than any knife, "Perhaps we should host our annual dinner here this year. We have more space now, don't we, Robert?" My stomach dropped. My housewarming,
A celebration of our new beginning was being hijacked. I turned to Robert, hoping for support. "Did you know about this?" I asked, voice tight. He didn't meet my eyes. I I thought it would be fine," he muttered, a feeble attempt at explanation that only deepened my sense of betrayal. Nancy, sensing the tension, leaned in with a practiced smile. "Your sentimentality is charming, Peggy, but impractical. A home like this needs to serve a purpose, especially for public rooms. Crafts and family photos are lovely, but they're not suitable for entertaining." I could hardly breathe. Every word they spoke, every subtle manipulation was a reminder that this home, the house I had fought so hard to own, to make mine, was slipping from my hands. Guests, oblivious to the drama unfolding, mingled while I felt the walls closing in. The humiliation escalated when I discovered my father had been sent outside to wait, under the guise of taking care of some outdoor arrangements. He was shivering in the cold while Nancy and Walter entertained their friends inside. My father, always composed, looked uncomfortable and hurt, but he didn't complain. The casual cruelty of leaving him outside while my in-laws socialized revealed a level of disregard I had never imagined. By the end of the evening, the realization hit me like a tidal wave. This was not a harmless interference. It was a calculated takeover, a violation of boundaries I hadn't yet fully understood. The housewarming had become a stage for their social ambitions, and I, along with my parents, were merely props in their performance. I quietly excused myself under the pretense of checking on something upstairs. My heart raced as I packed a small bag, the weight of betrayal pressing down with each fold of clothing. Robert watched from the doorway, but did nothing. Nancy's practiced concern fell on deaf ears as I walked past them, determination overtaking shock. That night, at Vanessa's apartment, the dam broke. Between sobs, I recounted the events, the control, the humiliation my father left in the cold, and Vanessa's horror mirrored my own. "They changed your locks? Without telling you?" she asked incredulously. "This isn't just manipulation. It could be illegal." The magnitude of the betrayal became painfully clear. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a deliberate, calculated assault on my home, my trust, and the safety of those I loved. The housewarming, meant to celebrate love and new beginnings, instead had unveiled the true character of the people I had hoped to trust. The morning after the disastrous housewarming, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that refused to loosen. The events of the previous evening replayed in my mind like a dark, twisted film. My parents' faces, shivering outside, and Robert's passive complicity haunted me. I needed clarity, and clarity often came in the form of facts. Sitting at my laptop, I logged into our joint bank accounts, my hands trembling slightly. I wanted to believe there was a simple explanation for Robert's behavior, but what I discovered left me speechless. A withdrawal of nearly $40,000 had been made 3 days before the housewarming, without discussion or consent. The money wasn't earmarked for bills, emergencies, or even a personal splurge. The memo said home improvements, but no prior conversation had occurred. I called our bank immediately, trying to keep my voice steady. A polite representative confirmed that Robert had indeed withdrawn the funds in person, using our joint account. "Did he notify you?" I asked. "No," the representative said. That single word felt like a punch to the gut. How could someone you trusted make decisions of such magnitude without so much as a conversation? Panic mixed with fury. I couldn't think clearly about the housewarming anymore. My parents had been endangered. Now our finances were at risk. The logical next step was to gather advice from professionals. My colleague Olivia, whose brother ran a financial advisory firm, listened to the situation with a seriousness that mirrored my own anxiety. "You need to protect yourself, Peggy," she said firmly. "If they are capable of this, there's no telling what else they might try." I scheduled a consultation with her brother, a sharp financial advisor who immediately began analyzing our accounts. He confirmed my fears. Robert's withdrawal had depleted a large portion of our liquid savings, leaving us dangerously exposed. The good news, he noted, was that since I was the primary name on the mortgage due to my larger down payment, I retained certain rights to the property. That would give me leverage in the coming storm. As I processed this, I also discovered another troubling detail. An email receipt had appeared in our shared cloud account for catering services, charged to our joint credit card, totaling $22,000. The receipt wasn't addressed to Robert or me, but to Walter. It became increasingly clear that the housewarming hadn't been a casual event. It had been meticulously planned as a platform for Robert's parents to showcase their control and social influence. I confided in Vanessa that evening, tears of frustration spilling freely. She listened, her expression growing more concerned with every detail. "This is beyond family drama, Peggy. This is financial manipulation and potentially illegal. You've got to document everything." Over the next few days, I compiled evidence: bank statements, emails, receipts, even notes I had made about conversations with Robert. Each piece painted a damning picture. The housewarming had been a smokescreen, a distraction while Robert's parents orchestrated a takeover, financially, socially, and emotionally. Then came an unexpected call from Robert's sister, someone I had always seen as distant but polite. She said, "I heard about what happened." Her voice carried genuine concern. "I'm so sorry. They did the same thing to my husband and me 3 years ago." Her story mirrored mine in unnerving detail. Nancy and Walter had a pattern, inserting themselves into their children's homes during major life events, slowly taking control and leaving a trail of strained relationships and financial entanglements. By the time we got them to leave, we almost had no say in our own home. They convinced my husband I was overwhelmed and it was for my own good. Hearing her recount this, I realized my worst suspicions were true. This wasn't just a one-time act of interference. It was a systemic pattern. Nancy and Walter had been planning to gradually turn our home into a domain for themselves, with Robert either too afraid or too conditioned to resist. The magnitude of the betrayal hit me fully. My trust in Robert, my assumption that our marriage was a partnership, and my confidence in maintaining control of my home had all been weaponized against me. This was no longer just about feelings or emotions. It was about survival, protection of my parents, and safeguarding the life we had worked so hard to build. That night, I began strategic planning. I would need legal counsel, financial oversight, and emotional support. Vanessa, Olivia, and the financial advisor became my core team. Together, we mapped out every step: reclaim our finances, secure the house, and confront Robert and his parents in a controlled, professional environment. By the end of the week, the stakes were clear. This was a fight for control, safety, and justice. And I knew, deep in my bones, that I would not back down. The housewarming was the first battle, and the real war for our home and our lives was only just beginning. The housewarming was just the tip of the iceberg. The financial and personal takeover had been quietly planned for weeks, and I was finally ready to expose it. The week of careful planning had arrived, and with it, the culmination of months of betrayal, frustration, and sleepless nights. Every phone call with Vanessa, Olivia, and the financial advisor had been meticulously logged. Legal counsel had been retained, documents prepared, and a strategy devised to reclaim both the house and the financial integrity that had been so callously disregarded. Tuesday morning dawned cold and gray, but my resolve burned brighter than ever. I had arranged for a locksmith to meet me at the house, accompanied by a police officer. It was not a decision made lightly, but necessary. The locks had been changed without my consent, leaving me legally and practically powerless in my own home. My attorney had insisted on the escort, a precaution that reflected the seriousness of the situation. As we pulled up in front of the house, a sense of vindication surged through me. This was my domain, and I intended to reclaim it without further compromise. The officer accompanied me inside while the locksmith moved efficiently from room to room, changing locks and updating security codes. Each click of the key was a symbolic reclamation of control. Inside, the evidence of Nancy and Walter's intrusion was impossible to ignore. The guest room closet contained neatly arranged garment bags with NOI's clothing, and the bathroom counters were lined with expensive skincare products, as if she had intended a long-term stay. My heart pounded with disbelief and rage. How had I allowed the situation to escalate so far? More alarming were the documents in Robert's home office. A folder labeled House Modifications contained contractor quotes and plans to transform the guest suite into a library and repurpose the office into another guest room. There was even a partially completed change of address form with Walter and Nancy listed as new residents. The dates suggested these plans had been in motion since shortly after closing on the house. Every piece of evidence pointed to premeditation. As I stood in the center of my living room, the weight of betrayal and determination intertwined. This wasn't just about reclaiming a physical space. It was about setting boundaries, protecting my parents, and asserting the autonomy that had been undermined for too long. Once the locks were secured, I documented everything, photos, receipts, and timestamps, to present a clear, indisputable record. Vanessa had insisted on this meticulous approach, and I was grateful for her foresight. Evidence would be crucial if legal action became necessary. With the house secured, I arranged a meeting at my attorney's office with Robert, Nancy, and Walter. Neutral territory would ensure that emotions did not escalate into chaos. As I arrived, I could see the discomfort etched on their faces. Walter's usual bravado faltered, and Nancy's practiced smile seemed forced. "This is completely unnecessary," Walter blustered, trying to assert control. "Family matters should be handled privately." I met his gaze steadily, my voice calm but firm. Unfortunately, when locks are changed without consent and significant sums withdrawn without discussion, this moves beyond family disagreements into potential legal territory. My attorney presented a clear, factual timeline: the housewarming takeover, the endangerment of my father, the financial withdrawals, and the unauthorized modifications. Robert's expression shifted from defensive to uncertain, while his parents remained stoic. The $40,000 withdrawn by Robert must be returned within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in formal legal action, my attorney concluded. Nancy's outrage was immediate. "This is extortion," she hissed. "No," I corrected calmly. "This is accountability, and it is non-negotiable." To my surprise, and perhaps theirs, Robert sided with me. "He will return the money and cover the medical expenses," he said quietly. His words sent shockwaves through the room. Walter's face flushed red and Nancy went pale. In that moment, the dynamic shifted. For the first time, Robert demonstrated alignment with reason and ethics over blind familial loyalty. The confrontation was not a theatrical victory, but a strategic reclamation of control. My home, my finances, and my parents' safety were no longer at the mercy of their manipulation. After the meeting, I felt an unexpected mixture of exhaustion and relief. This was not the end of the journey, but a crucial turning point. For the first time, I had transformed my anger into actionable power, setting the stage for not only recovery, but the potential rebuilding of trust in my marriage. As I locked the final door, I realized the battle for my home was won, but the war for trust and for Robert's true allegiance was only just beginning. The day after the confrontation, a strange calm settled over my home. The locks had been changed, the evidence documented, and Robert had finally acknowledged the gravity of his actions. Yet, beneath the surface, tension simmered. Rebuilding what had been broken, trust, safety, and a sense of control would be far more complicated than reclaiming the house itself. Vanessa insisted I take time for myself first. "You've done the hard part," she said. "Now it's about reinforcing boundaries and making sure this doesn't happen again." I nodded, grateful for her guidance. With her help, I began cataloging every detail: the unauthorized modifications, financial irregularities, and the moments that had endangered my parents. I realized that documentation wasn't just for legal protection, it was a roadmap to understanding the full scope of the manipulation I'd endured. Meanwhile, Robert began therapy as I had insisted. The first session with Dr. Harrison, a family dynamics specialist, revealed patterns I had suspected but never fully articulated. From a young age, Robert had been conditioned to appease his parents at all costs. Every deviation from their expectations had been met with withdrawal of love, subtle criticism, or manipulation. He had internalized the idea that family loyalty meant obedience, even at the expense of his own judgment. "I didn't realize how much of my decisions were influenced by them," Robert admitted one evening. His voice was low, tinged with guilt. "I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just avoiding conflict, including with you and your family, including your parents' safety." Listening to him, I felt a mixture of relief and caution. Relief that he recognized the problem, and caution because recognition alone wouldn't undo the harm caused. Trust, once shattered, required far more than words. It required consistent, verifiable actions. As Robert continued therapy, we began structured conversations about boundaries. We established clear rules for his parents: no unsupervised visits, prior approval for any plans involving the house, and zero financial decisions without joint consent. For Robert, these conversations were uncomfortable, but necessary. For me, they were empowering, a concrete reinforcement that I was no longer compromising my well-being for the sake of maintaining appearances. The physical reclamation of the house paralleled the emotional reclamation of our lives. The guest suite, once a symbol of intrusion, became a functional space for my parents' visits. Decorations imposed by Nancy were removed or donated, replaced with items that reflected our taste, our memories, and our sense of home. Every room told a story of resilience, of control regained. In parallel, my relationship with my parents deepened. Sunday dinners resumed, alternating between their home and mine. My father, previously reserved with emotions, expressed his gratitude through small, meaningful gestures: a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, an article I thought I'd enjoy, or simply a quiet presence that reminded me I was supported. My mother, while still cautious, offered her wisdom. Forgiveness does not mean relinquishing boundaries, and love should never come at the expense of safety. Her guidance became a stabilizing force as I navigated the next steps of my life. At work, I noticed subtle changes in myself. The crisis had sharpened my judgment and strengthened my confidence. I became more assertive, particularly in meetings where younger colleagues faced undue pressure or manipulation. Without revealing the personal details, I offered guidance on setting boundaries, recognizing manipulation, and asserting oneself effectively. Colleagues began to remark on a newfound certainty in my demeanor. "Something's different," Jordan observed after a particularly challenging client negotiation. "You're more certain." I smiled, choosing my words carefully. Protecting what matters isn't selfish, it's necessary. Through these months, I also discovered the nuanced process of reconciliation. Robert and I did not rush back into the previous version of our marriage. Instead, we cautiously constructed something new, built on accountability, therapy, and small, consistent acts of trust. Even simple gestures became profound. When Robert took the initiative to inform his parents of a planned visit rather than leaving it to me, it felt like a victory. When he upheld the boundaries we set without argument, I felt a cautious optimism. Step by step, the foundation for a healthier relationship was being laid. Yet, I remained vigilant. Trust could not be assumed, it had to be earned continuously. And as the weeks passed, I learned to balance openness with protection. Life could continue alongside careful boundaries, mutual respect, and intentional growth. Even as the house regained its calm, I knew that rebuilding trust with Robert was a journey far longer than reclaiming a door or a lock, and every step forward would test the limits of patience, forgiveness, and courage.
Life after the house takeover was more than just reclaiming physical space. It was about reclaiming myself, my voice, my decisions, and my energy. The weeks following the confrontation had revealed not only Robert's willingness to change, but also my own strength, which I hadn't fully acknowledged before. I realized that the courage I had summoned for my family and home could also empower my professional and social life in ways I had never imagined. Returning to work after the tumultuous weeks was both a relief and a challenge. At my marketing firm, projects had piled up, deadlines loomed, and clients expected the same high-level performance as ever. Yet, unlike before, I approached each task with a new clarity and authority, no longer overshadowed by doubt or the lingering effects of manipulation. I could lead with decisiveness. The confidence I had gained while standing up to Robert and his parents translated seamlessly into strategic thinking at work. One Monday morning, I walked into a client meeting with the poise that surprised even me. I had prepared for weeks, mapping out every possible question, anticipating objections, and developing solutions that balance creativity with practicality. As the meeting progressed, I noticed subtle changes in the way colleagues and clients engaged with me. There was respect, yes, but also a recognition that I was someone who could handle pressure, maintain composure, and deliver results with unwavering focus. "You seem more composed," my colleague Jordan said again, this time with a smile. "Like you're in full control of everything." I chuckled lightly, appreciating the observation. I've learned that control isn't about being rigid, it's about knowing what matters and protecting it. The revelation extended beyond work. Having navigated a personal crisis with such high stakes, I recognized the importance of social capital, invitations to key events, connections with influential figures, and the ability to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics. All of these became tools I could use without compromising my values. Vanessa and Olivia continued to support me, introducing me to professional networks and social circles where integrity and mutual respect were prioritized. Meanwhile, Robert's transformation was subtle but undeniable. He continued therapy consistently, taking responsibility for past patterns and learning to assert boundaries with his parents. He no longer hesitated to challenge Nancy and Walter and actively participated in discussions about our home, finances, and family priorities. This new version of Robert was not perfect, but he demonstrated genuine commitment to growth,
and that mattered more than any perfect record. One evening, as we reviewed upcoming family visits and financial planning, I saw a shift that made my heart lift. Robert suggested compromises that respected both our boundaries and his parents' desires, a delicate balance that required humility and insight. I want to be different, Peggy, not just for us, but for myself. I can't undo the past, but I can choose the future. I nodded, appreciating both the sentiment and the action behind it. Words meant little without consistent behavior, and Robert's actions began to reflect true change. It wasn't an immediate restoration of trust. It was a steady, deliberate construction of a healthier dynamic. Socially, Nancy and Walter experienced consequences for their manipulation. Word of their actions, carefully framed by my attorney, spread through their networks. Invitations ceased. Positions of influence were quietly withheld, and their social standing, which they had always treasured, eroded slowly. Watching them grapple with these consequences reinforced a critical lesson. Boundaries protect not only our personal life, but also social and professional integrity. At the same time, my network strengthened. I forged deeper connections with colleagues, mentors, and friends who valued authenticity. Opportunities emerged organically: speaking engagements, leadership roles, and professional collaborations, all of which were made possible by the clarity and assertiveness I had cultivated during the crisis. The empowerment that began at home had now extended outward, creating a ripple effect across every aspect of my life. Even more important was my personal clarity I gained. I had learned that relationships, whether romantic, familial, or professional, thrive on mutual respect, shared values, and open communication. Without these pillars, even the most seemingly secure bonds could crumble. And while I remained cautious with Robert, I also recognized the value of forgiveness paired with vigilance. True reconciliation wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a future informed by lessons learned. As I walked into yet another high-stakes meeting, confident and unshakable, I realized that the battles fought at home had equipped me for far greater challenges. But one question lingered. Could the past ever fully release its grip? Or would the shadows of betrayal always follow, testing the strength of this newly forged life? The months that followed were a test of patience, resilience, and foresight. I had spent a long time defining my boundaries, reclaiming my home, and rebuilding the fractured trust in my marriage. But life, I realized, wasn't about simply surviving. It was about transforming every wound into a foundation for strength. The first victory came quietly. Robert had maintained his commitment to therapy and had learned to assert himself in ways that I had only dreamed of before. The man I saw now was no longer the one who prioritized his parents' social ambitions over the well-being of those he loved. He began to recognize manipulative patterns in his family, acknowledged their toxicity, and most importantly, respected the boundaries we had established. The small gestures mattered. He checked in with me before responding to his parents' requests, sought my opinion on household decisions, and openly communicated his own concerns without fear of judgment. At home, everything slowly returned to a rhythm of stability and trust. The guest suite, once the symbol of intrusion, remained a space that reflected our shared tastes and comfort. Decorations that Nancy had installed were either returned or donated, replaced with items that represented our personalities rather than a forced social standard. Each room, each corner, became a testament to our hard-won autonomy and shared vision. Professionally, my confidence translated into tangible success. I led major campaigns at work, guided teams through high-pressure negotiations, and became a mentor for younger colleagues navigating challenging dynamics. The crisis had sharpened my ability to read people, anticipate challenges, and act decisively, a skill set that elevated my career in ways I hadn't anticipated. My social network expanded, not through superficial connections, but through meaningful relationships built on trust and mutual respect. Vanessa, Olivia, and others became my chosen family, offering support, guidance, and perspective. As for Robert's parents, accountability had left a mark. Nancy and Walter, confronted with the legal and social consequences of their actions, had no choice but to acknowledge the boundaries we had set. Visits were scheduled and supervised, communication was limited to essential topics, and any attempts to overstep were met with firm, immediate correction. Slowly, they began to understand that their influence had limits and that respect could not be negotiated. It had to be earned. The emotional reconciliation with my own parents remained a cornerstone of this new life. Sunday dinners returned, alternating between their home and mine, each gathering a blend of laughter, reflection, and gentle reminders of the storm we had survived. My father, once stoic, expressed his pride and love through small but meaningful gestures. My mother, wise and resilient, shared insights on forgiveness, boundaries, and love that guided me daily. Their faith in me had never wavered, and it became a source of strength that fueled every decision I made. Robert and I continued the delicate work of rebuilding our marriage. Trust, once broken, could never be restored overnight. But through therapy, honest communication, and consistent actions, we began constructing a relationship that prioritized safety, respect, and partnership. We learned that reconciliation is not about forgetting mistakes, but about acknowledging them, learning from them, and choosing a new path forward together. One evening, as we sat in our living room discussing plans for the future, I felt a profound sense of clarity. The fear, anger, and hurt that had once consumed me had been replaced by purpose, resilience, and discernment. I understood that life's most difficult challenges were also opportunities for growth. I had learned to stand firm, to protect those I loved, and to navigate the complexities of family, marriage, and social dynamics without losing my sense of self. Looking back, that fateful housewarming party was not just a betrayal, it was a turning point. It exposed weaknesses, revealed hidden strengths, and reshaped relationships in ways that were both painful and necessary. I had emerged not only as a protector of my family and home, but as a leader in my professional and personal life, equipped with wisdom and clarity that few experiences could provide. As I closed the door behind me one evening, walking into the quiet sanctuary of a home truly my own, I realized the most important truth. Boundaries are not walls. They are the foundation for love, respect, and safety. The people who deserve a place in our lives are those who honor those boundaries. And sometimes the family we choose is just as vital as the family we're born into. The journey had been long, the wounds deep, but the lessons learned were priceless. And as Robert reached for my hand, a gesture once uncertain, but now steady, I understood that the future was no longer defined by fear or betrayal. It was defined by strength, wisdom, and the courage to protect what truly matters. The storm had passed, but its echoes remained, reminding me that vigilance is never wasted, and that true love and respect are earned, safeguarded, and fiercely protected. As the door closed behind me the past, I stepped forward, ready for whatever came next, knowing this time I held the keys.